India, an emerging defense and aerospace innovation hub. This pivotal discussion will delve into the intricacies of India's emergence as a hub for innovation in the defense and aerospace sector, shedding light on the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. I'm glad to share that we have leaders from the Indian Air Force, DRDO, VC ecosystem, and entrepreneurs. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our esteemed panelists, each bringing a wealth of knowledge and expertise to this discourse. As our panelists, we have Air Marshal AVSM VM, Indian Air Force, Shri Srikumar Prabhakaran, retired, Shri G. Satish Reddy, Chairman of the Governing Body of Aeronautical Development Agency, Mr. Lakshminath V., Managing Partner, Pavestone VC, Mr. Sanjay Nikanti, Founder and CEO of Dhruva Space Private Limited. As a moderator, we have Wing Commander Anish Anthony, retired, the Chief Operating Officer of T-Hub.
The first theme will be the optimizing the utilization of startup as a driver of innovation, defense and the aerospace sector. So my first question will probably go to you, sir. I think, like he said, there are almost 850 plus startups in the defense and aerospace innovation ecosystem today. How can the Indian government and established defense firms, they can help startups to integrate better into the defense innovation ecosystem? What do you think that the startups need to do from their side? And what do you think that the ecosystem, senior players in the ecosystem like the DPSUs or the corporates need to do to help them integrate better?
Point what you asked me. Firstly, looking at the innovations in the country, the startups in the country, there is a huge quantum jump in the number of systems which have come up. As you know, in 2016, there were about 460 or so startups. Now there are about 1,14,000 startups which have come up in the country and going on every day. And defense was normally kept away for all the even startups and in the industries also. That now, that gap has been filled. Industry are also working a lot for the defense and a lot of startups have also started coming in. A lot of schemes government has brought in, like Defense Secretary has mentioned some time back, the IDEX or the TDF or Make 1, Make 2, IDDM and all those things have come up. But still, as far as the startups are concerned, I feel there are many things which need to be addressed and which many things need to be simplified. Firstly, the funding. In India, I still consider, in India, early stage startups or deep tech startups, funding is a question mark from India. As most of them are somehow managing with the funding from outside, and here getting it is little difficult. Second, when we look at even IDEX or anything, the funding is primarily for a product or a technological product, whichever way it is you say, as an end product or a technological product, not as such for a technology, which actually is supposed to have been from TDF. Somehow the TDF, I think last couple of years has not taken very well in the last couple of years. So that's another thing. So when you look at that type of a funding, the IDEX 10 crores, even though it has been increased from 1 crores to 10 crores, that is not sufficient. The TDF funding has been increased from 10 crores to 50 crores, that's a good thing. So that needs to be supported. Probably the other schemes like NRF or the quantum mission, which are about 50,000 crores and 6,500 crores which are coming up, these missions should be able to support the deep tech startups getting into technology. What I am saying is, the startups here, if they have to beat the world market, and not just the Indian people, the product really has to be a technologically advanced or first of its kind product. Then you need to spend a lot, both funding-wise and otherwise, a lot into the deep technology. This is one of the issues what we face. Second, whatever Defense Secretary said, they are all at the system level and product level what services the armed forces require. Many of the things which startups produce are not the end product what goes to services. Let's say you have a product, subsystem or a product which goes into a tank or which goes into a fighter aircraft, the services won't come into picture unless he is responsible for the MRO of that and all that. It is some other agency which comes into picture, which has established supply chain. You have to break that chain and see that this product gets into it. There is a pain involved into it. That pain, this agency, whichever is responsible, should be able to take the pain. This is a second issue, because many of the startups, they don't bring an aircraft, they don't build a tank. So they build a product which is a technology-based product which needs to get into it. You have, let's say, an IR camera you have. If he makes a bolometer-based camera today, how does it get into the system? Who takes the decision? How does it get into all the processes? And the man who is already responsible for it, how does he take a risk in the government side also? This risk-taking are a aggressive approach to have the new products or indigenous products or the startups-based innovations, we need to get into it. This is the second issue what it is. And thirdly, even the products which are getting into the services, one thing is it takes about 2 to 3 years time process today. And unless a product is normally in defense, the norm is if a product is not inducted into the services of the respective country, the other country won't buy. General norm it is. So how does this get into quickly? Whether this process can be hastened? If not, can the startup sustain this period of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years for the product to get into it? Development cycle, the acquisition process, the induction process, the trials, quality, whatever it is. This is another issue what the startups need to. One more issue I think I feel is, particularly in the defense, the connectivity for the startups is also a big question mark. Whom to approach for what? Whatever an idea I have. That's number one. Second thing is, a suo moto proposal or an ab initio idea, how does it get into it? IDEX gives you challenges, you have to get into that challenges only. No, he has got a completely different thing and nothing connected to the verticals which are proposed by anyone. Need to propose that and I want to come into that, and how do I maintain that? How do I get into this system? Second, if I come out with an innovation, an innovative idea, and if you make it public, if I approach you, you are in the government, if you make it public, it is no more an innovation of the particular individual startup. You put it in limited tender and are open to take the idea and put it into,
First mover advantage.
Absolutely lost. So these, I can narrate many of the issues. I thought these are some of the issues what startups have, which you need to see. I don't think I should much comment on what startups should do, because they are just coming up. We need to encourage them. We need to understand them. Otherwise, the ecosystem won't come in the country. So maximum needs to be done by the bigger industries, or DPSUs, or the government needs to address the issues what I have mentioned.
Air Marshal Prabhakaran sir, I think you've served for more than 40 years in the Indian Air Force, right? At multiple levels, at an operator level, at a decision maker level, finally as an Air Marshal in the Southern Air Command, right? You've flown fighters, you commanded units. From a user perspective, right? There will always be an apprehension when adopting newer technologies. And more so, I think if you put from the lens of a pessimist, right? You will, typically we prepare for the worst. When in flying, we prepare for all of these emergencies who are inherently preparing for the worst case scenario where you can handle them effectively. So if I put that same lens onto startups and say, hey, am I getting a system which is not as well proven, which is not having as much of a production line capacity, which the gestation period has not been as much as other. So how do you think that from the user perspective, from the armed forces perspective, you can open up to be enabled to accommodate for more startup related technologies to be adopted into the armed forces?
What I mean is that it gives an opportunity for the young innovators to get in touch with the end users. I can tell you my experience in the Air Force is because we always have to go through the ministry, through the DRDO. Ultimately, the user never really comes face to face with the actual innovator. So I was very glad to hear the Defense Secretary mention today that The ministry is changing its rules, making things much simpler. Even though, I mean, a lot of improvements have been done in the last 10 years, but still we have some way to go. But despite that, he mentioned that any of the innovator who has been selected, and today I could see some bright guys coming up and picking up prizes, that the Air Force, let's say it was an Air Force issue, or the Army or the Navy, they would handhold them to take them right till the end of the tunnel. So that is one thing which can happen when you have more such interactions right from the user up to the guy who actually makes the product.
So, what would be your advice to startups? How can they reach out to help these navigate these barriers more effectively?
See, now, like once again, what the Defense Secretary mentioned in the website, all the various, and I think there are more than 2,000 or 3,000 items which have been listed out. So they could go on to that. They could see where it is that their, which niche, this thing they can work on, and thereafter they come and through T-Hub, through the ministry, once we get, because the Air Force directly cannot deal with the innovators. That's the problem, you see. But once they have been seen, like, for example, I would really love if the few guys, the few company, startups who were called on stage today, if through you all, they could be made to go to Air Headquarters, to the Directorate of Project, who's in charge of all new thing, and give their ideas. Maybe something will click. Not all, I don't say all, but something could. So I think these are the ways and means of moving things ahead, because like I think it was often brought out, India is the third or the fourth largest, as far as defense equipment buying is concerned. Why should all that go abroad when we have all the brilliant minds, as Sri Bhatia mentioned, 450,000 Indian engineers working for companies abroad. So all this we need to harness so that we become, self-sufficient and not depend too much on others. In fact, I would like to bring this point. When he spoke about this dependence on others during war, I think Sri Bhatia mentioned during war, it becomes critical. I'd like to tell the audience, in the 1982 Falklands War, when Argentina went against Britain, Argentina had just bought Super Etendard aircraft, right? And their pilots were just about undergoing training. They were halfway through their training, and they just got, I think, 6 Sea Eagle missiles when France put a stop to their training and a stop to any more knowledge passed on to them. So these 6 pilots who had been trained, between themselves, they quickly trained, they learned how to use that missile, and they knew they had only 6 of these missiles. And they managed to use it to sink 2 or 3 of the, you would be aware of that. So that's the kind of, hold which a foreign country can have on you when you're in trouble. So it is so important to be as self-sufficient as possible.
You got around 35 years of experience, right? Global business strategy, innovation, M&As. You now run Pavestone, which is probably one of the largest funds in India as a managing partner at Pavestone. One of the biggest challenges for defense startups in particular is the ticket size of that entire development cycle that they go through, right? I mean, it is not as easy or as easy to access to capital when it comes to getting that size of capital. Even from the investor's perspective also, the gestation period is too long for that, right? So how do you think that the startups could be able to navigate these challenges that they encounter in the defense and aerospace sector?
So I run a $100 million fund. We focus on 2 areas. One is what we call B2B, and one is what we call as frontier technology. And I'll kind of tell you how that kind of fits in. And we probably were one of the first funds to support a defense startup. Probably 2.5 years back, the company is New Space Research, one of India's, the first Indian company to launch swarming drone technology, one of the most heavily funded companies at this point in time. So Can talk a little bit about the journey, but I'll try to give you the gist of it. I think there are 2, 3 things that we need to keep in mind. As a VC, obviously, we have a fund, we have raised money from investors, so we owe a return to the investors. And there's a certain time frame that we operate in. So there's obviously a pressure on returning money capital back, and there's a return pressure. So that's something you need to always keep in mind at the back of when you're trying to make a decision. Okay. Second thing is, when we look at this space, standard issues apply. One is, if I'm funding something in a B2C space, I know that there are, 500 million Indians, and I can see a large market, and I can do the multiples, right?
Yeah.
Here, the usual questions are, we have a single client risk. When the person is selling, there's just one large client he is to sell to. What happens if, if there's a change in something, we don't know what it is, right? And then what's the impact? So that's something that we'll obviously have to consider. And people then, kind of pivot with, I have something for dual use kind of technology. I can do both commercial and defense and exports. That's one of the mitigation strategies. Second thing is number of institutional investors, especially outside of India, do not invest in defense. So if your fund is focused on defense totally, then they would not, invest in you. So
like a dual-use startup, you have a dual-use fund as well.
Yeah,
right?
no, in the sense it's very difficult for you to raise large amounts of money because, they have the restrictions, rightly, wrongly, that's very difficult for us to raise that. So very important to manage the LPs in your fund. So that's the second constraint that we have, okay? So in order to address that, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the other positives that is, in order to address that, we kind of look at it as, it's not just about startups. How do you make the startup a grown-up? Okay, that's the most important part, right? Yeah. Startup is nice. You get the fund, you get grants, you get to a certain level. The beauty of the game is how do you make it a large company, an institution, okay? So in order to do that, what we've been trying to do is we are looking at them through our what we call a frontier technology lens. We have a certain portion of our budget allocated for that. And if they do well, then we look at them through the B2B lens, okay? That is, and Satish Reddy sir mentioned that it is about, say, if you have to sell to you have to sell a platform, you're one part of it. Your product alone doesn't sell, okay? It is, how does it fit in? How does it work in many things? What's the cost of replacement? What's the cost of integration testing? Your product may cost 1 rupee. To test it, it may cost $1 million rupees. Okay? Yeah. So you should look at it through that lens. It's extremely important. And anybody who's been in large corporations and sold large systems like core banking know the importance of it. So understanding B2B mindset is extremely important. So we look at startups through a frontier technology lens, and if they do well, then we are open to consider it as a B2B. And we have 2 buckets for it. Okay. Sure. Secondly, we also have a strong LP network. Today, we talk to a lot of LPs, and a lot of family offices are very interested in funding. So the fund may put a certain amount, but along with the LPs, you can actually put in a larger amount. Okay, so that's the way we try to mitigate it. So fund is, when you look at your, let's say you're a startup and you're looking at a VC, early stage, early growth is great. But if they don't have a B2B strategy, you may not get supported long term unless they have a very strong LP network. That's the way I kind of think about it. Coming to the startups, I think fantastic energy, passion there. I think my only submission is when I look at it from a platform lens, okay? And the kind of skills that you need for this space is extremely different from, you need, it's a mission critical system. So the way you build it, you deploy it is extremely different. So that mindset is extremely important. So that's what I would like to say, and happy to take any more questions.
Sanjay, I think, navigated this space quite well over the last few years, right? I think you've recently raised a round also. I think we'd love to hear about that as well. But what would be your advice to 2 parts, right? One is to startups who want to build out in the space sector. And second is to organizations like T-Hub who want to help out to build out a vertical for the space sector startups.
Started my company in 2012, straight out of college, talking to prospective customers. And my prospective customers were largely academic institutions who were trying to build space missions. When I also tried to talk to users, being the Triforces or talking to ISRO, DRDO, it was practically very difficult to sell because nobody was willing to believe that a 24-year-old can actually start like a space tech company in the country.
But why space tech? I mean, why space tech, space engineering?
Sure. So So after the success of Chandrayaan-1, there was a scientist from ISRO who had visited our university. I was studying at SRM University in Chennai, and he said that we as students could actually build a satellite. Uh, I was part of a very large audience, and I was definitely very excited about the idea, but I wasn't really sure if something like that was possible. And then our university decided to fund that program, and we ended up building this whole satellite. And during the process of building the satellite, I realized that, we are a country with 1 billion people, but, we've sent missions to moon. We were talking about other, really great missions. We have a fantastic defense program, but there's not a single private company in the country that was building full satellites and serving global markets. So for me, that was like the trigger point that as a 19-year-old, if I'm able to build out a satellite, why is it that you can't build a business in the country? And that kind of motivated me to take this journey. However, first things first, it becomes when you're a startup, when you're trying to build out a business, the question, where do you get the money? Who is your customer, right? And for customer or business, you need a product, right? So where do you start, right? So initially when we started off, we were talking about building a satellite, trying to raise capital. And then investors would be like, okay, but who is your customer? And I'm like, okay, I don't have a customer. And that's when I truly believe that the policy changes within the country opened up the opportunity for us, where, the Startup India program giving a level playing opportunity for a startup to also work with a large company allowed us to look at problem statements laid down by the users or R&D institutions. For example, our first large customer was DRDO, where we had actually bid for building, rather indigenizing one of the most critical components that is used on satellites, which is the satellite solar arrays. We built a small solar panel, a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter one used for satellites. But when we went to DRDO and said, hey, we can actually build out like a 1 meter by 1.2 meter panel, it was not easy, right? Because ISRO was doing it for many, many years. And it's a very complex problem to solve. That we were able to solve by piecing multiple things together. Like we worked with the PSUs in the country, we worked with BHEL, we worked with L&T, which is a larger entity. We did the design. We leveraged the ecosystem to solve that problem. So once that problem was solved, we had investors to believe that, okay, hey, you know what, you have a customer, you're serving that need, and now the question becomes, are you good enough for a VC play or not, right? So when I started looking at capital, now that I have a product, now that I have a customer, the question became like, who would back this business? And the problem when we were trying to raise capital in 2017, 2018 timeframe was precisely that, VC funds were largely looking at non-defense programs. And when you say that your customer is going to be a defense customer, VCs would be like, okay, probably not our bet. So what we did, how we were able to solve that problem is we had angel investors who came on board. So I had to talk to about 160 investors before finding our first play. Then the playbook became little more streamlined because the policy worked, the customer side of things worked. In terms of scaling up, just like what Sir mentioned, I think as a defense or a space company, if your strategy is you're only building a space or a defense company, it's very hard. So we are largely looking at a dual use case where the applications that we are building for space and defense will also have a commercial application. If we are building a remote sensing satellite, I can sell the remote sensing satellite data to many other people.
Primary forte has been communications. One of the, I still feel that you should have focus on that, which have both dual use purpose, and I think world is moving to that, and try to do more and more focus in that. Probably somewhere we should work with the government and definitely get a bigger project, whatever our 108 satellite or whatever it is, that scheme. I think somehow I feel that you should focus more on that.
Sure, sir. Thank you very much for the advice. So, one of our biggest challenges were, especially to focus on one specific application, was that how do you address a rapidly changing market environment? So we wanted to build a what do you call foundation that will enable us to serve a variety of applications in any changing market environment. So instead of focusing on communication specifically, what we decided was that we will play a platform play, where if a customer wants a imaging satellite, the platform can be utilized for imaging application. If the customer wants it for weather, etc., again it can be customized for that application.
Hyderabad per se, Hyderabad, Telangana per se, is has a lot of strengths when it comes to defense and aerospace manufacturing. You look at aviation academies, you look at the number of high precision engineering companies or SMEs that are there available in Hyderabad, right? A lot of corporates have already started moving in. Tassel Lelo, GMR Lelo, Boeing, all of Airbus, all of them have started moving in here. What are the kind of opportunities that you think that will unlock for startups, not only in the engineering, precision engineering space, but beyond that, do you think Hyderabad can become a defense startup hub for the rest of India, a defense startup capital for the rest of India?
See, yeah, one thing like Mr. Jayesh Ranjan was mentioning, Hyderabad has been a prime city or center for defense, primarily, and also aerospace. If you look at all the DRDO laboratories which have come here, have come in somewhere 1958 or 1960, and I'm sure majority of the laboratories are here, and actually they're mostly divided between Bangalore and Hyderabad, and majority of the funding goes to these laboratories because they are more of strategic in nature and working more in aero, missiles and electronic warfare and all that. Then if you look at the PSUs, again you have everything here. You have the complete HL unit, you have the Bharat Electronics working on electronic warfare, and BDL, which has got 2 units here, and then over and above that you have related materials, related NFC and NFTC, and then you have ECIL, which are there. And I almost think that the number of industries which have been supporting, which have been in the part of the supply chain here, have been about more than 1,000 industries which have been there in that. One example which not today, almost about 4 or 5 years back, example I try to give, one of the missiles which got into armed forces maximum in number, value wise, is Akash missile, more than about 25 to 30,000 crores worth. BDL is the integrator, or BDL is the production agency, whatever you call it. And almost about 86 to 87% by value of the Akash missile has been coming from the MSMEs, and mostly from Hyderabad. 86, 87%. So VDL actually primarily has been concentrating only on the integration, and they went to the extent of supplying 60 missiles a month. And then one day I remember CMD BDL was promising that I can go even to 120 missiles a month. So that's out of the support what has come in. Now the things are changing. The warfare, actually technologies what are used in the war are changing a lot. Never we thought that drones will play so much of a role, and weapons, the lasers, the electromagnetic pulse, and related so many systems started coming into it, which actually the startups have taken the forte. Like example you take in Hyderabad, the quantum technology. At least there are 2 companies which have come here who are working on quantum memories and quantum communication related things and all that. You see the drones and anti-drones systems, at least I think two companies have seen. One is that Big Bang Boom, and one more company from Hyderabad who have come up with small anti-drone systems which are required today, which actually is continuously changing today. See, today, if you talk about a anti-drone technology, talking about a one-to-one system or a laser system or a jamming thing, doesn't work today anymore after 1 or 2 years. You need to have technologies which are coming up in a big way, like swarm technologies, and there are 500 drones coming. How do you handle them? What type of technologies you require? This is where requirement. So the necessary background and base exists in Hyderabad out of so many academic institutions here, and that too particularly today, over and above that academic institutions, which are probably 300 academic institutions in around Hyderabad. Then IIT, which has come in, triple IT, and even in ISB, a lot of innovations which are coming out. So lots of innovations are coming up. If you look at last 3 months, I myself, at least I have visited and gone to almost about 50 startups and seeing working for aerospace and defense. And so people are coming up. It's only the right guidance, what type of a right novel thinking, an idea which is not existing sort of an one, where you come out and you are able to design and get funds for that and provide is what is required. So I definitely perceive, very strongly perceive, for defense, Hyderabad as the strong base for innovations to come up, and aerospace also definitely, out of many things which are coming up in the aerospace sector, with ISRO also having its presence, and various other aviation sectors, like you said, TASL and many other companies which are coming. Actually, we were talking to Mr. Mohan Reddy also, the way their companies, many people who have become part of supply chain to the entire world. So you need to have all those components or subsystems and products which are there to come out with innovative, the technologies which are coming up and supply is one thing. And particularly with you, T-Hub and T-Works coming up, I think it has given the necessary boost into this city or into the state or surrounding places where a lot of people are jumping into it. And the only thing is, we have to see that those people who have jumped into it, at least down the line, 5 years, they should start tasting the success. Otherwise, the next batch, should not be held because these people didn't get the success. And that is where we all have to see that the state government and central government agencies which are present here, organizations present here, make the startups which have already jumped into it come up successfully. Whatever time period, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, that should happen. I think that kicks off the Hyderabad, which has got the necessary ecosystem, support system, all infrastructure existing in the industry base, which is existing, you should be able to take on.
If you look at the 2025 capital outlay for the capital expenditure for the Ministry of Defense, almost $20 billion has been set aside for capital expenditure, right? Now you overlay that with the policy of having to procure locally as a norm, and then go internationally in case of an exception of something that is not available here. Recently, I think the list 5 has come out for protective good, which you have to prepare only in India, right? When you overlay all of these things together, the defense sector now suddenly starts becoming a lot of opportunities start getting created for in-house, homegrown countries. So do you see LPs, investors, funds looking at that opportunity positively? Do you see an inflow of funds, or maybe at a certain point of time, near future, medium future, defense-focused funds getting created?
Absolutely, I see that. My simple analogy on that is, see, end of the day when you're eating, right, dal roti makes the major portion of your meal, okay?
Yeah.
The innovation and all is nice, it's very, sexy, etc. But lot of basic stuff that you consume is most important. And when you talk of something like that, fundamentals are extremely important. So I strongly see that happening. And I see that there will be essentially 3 plays in that. One is there will be companies, there will be VCs which will fund that kind of enterprises at a B2B kind of level. Secondly, you will see PEs come in. who will integrate some of these things and provide a longer solution. See, this is more a P play than a VC play because this becomes a margin play rather than a revenue play, right?
Yeah.
Moment it's a margin play, you will see a lot more
Bigger players
P companies come in. And you will also see larger companies, look at this space and kind of do acquisition. So I see these three things, okay? I just wanted to point out one thing on what Satish Reddy sir said on ecosystem. I think absolutely, in the sense, ecosystem is the end of the day, it's not buildings, it's culture, okay? And culture is all about conversations, okay? Just to give, and it's going to take time. I was part of the management team which set up India's first multinational software company in '86, okay, Intergraph. And today, the GC system is one of the largest, okay? Why? Because there's a brand built. So the way I look at it is, 50 years back, if you talk to India, people associated you with Mahatma Gandhi,
Yeah.
okay? 30 years back, Mahatma Gandhi and yoga, okay? Now it's Mahatma Gandhi, yoga and IT, okay, and space, right? I see that brand is an extremely important component. And I see that events like this, the conversations are very important. See, 30 years back, when you went to a coffee shop here, people will talk about, only two things. Where do I buy the next land? When do I go abroad? When do I get my green card, right? Those would be the conversations. But today, the conversations today are very different. What am I building? How do I make a difference? So that's extremely powerful, okay? And I see that as a big game changer. So.
Yes, please.
One of the things which came up, especially for the young innovators or startups, is that if you only look at the defense market, that means if it's only, let's say, the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, then you may be looking at a very small market. So one of the things which I think present day Indians, when they start something, is they have to look global, which means, I think it was brought out by one of the speakers, that you have to look at standards not just for the Indian Defense Forces, but something which in due course you can export. So it has to be that kind of a standard which you aim for right from the beginning.
Satish sir, you had a comment?
This particular point, people are looking at it. See, I keep saying in my talks, with the startup ecosystem coming up in the country, the mindset of the country has changed. The mindset of the country, whoever wanted to start industries earlier, used to be an ancillary mindset. Can I supply to DRDO? Can I supply to HMT? Can I supply to BHL? And what product you want and all. Now the mindset, whoever is working, I've seen lots of products. The product, actually, they are looking at a globally marketable product. Example, I'll give you just a medical device, somebody I was seeing. You touch that with your thumb, then it gives you the blood sugar, BP, heart rate, and ECG, and whatnot, oxygen levels and everything. Nowhere exists in the world. The type of quality, the product, and each and every details the startup has gone into it, right from anodization, how to make the box, the unit,
form factor,
much better than many of the most modern mobiles.
Handsets,
Is much better the quality is. Only thing is, the problem is, as I said, the marketing capability, the initial funding, and the right connects into the world or in the country. These are the issues what we need to look at for the startups, and that happens, I think people are geared up.
Sure.
And it is the country, the type of momentum what it has got, if we are actually not sustain that momentum, it is very difficult for this country to get back again.
So are investors now starting to, the ISRO or the governmental space program has made a niche for itself across the world. I mean, it is very well renowned, recognized and all of that, right? In the private sector, do you see investors looking at Indian space sector as an opportunity to carve out a fund there, to be able to set aside fund, like they've set aside, Pavestone set aside for defense, for example, right? And then maybe move on to a B2B play. Do you think people are starting to carve out those in their portfolios, carve out those funds to be able to deploy into the space sector?
Definitely see a lot of interest from investors looking at the space and defense sector increase over the last 12 to 18 months. However, it's also what kind of investors are looking is also very important.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of capital has been raised in the Western markets to, meet certain goals. And but if you look at their capability on delivering results, some of them who've done SPAC deals and went public, they're not performing the way they were supposed to do. So there is also a possibility that some of these companies would like to deploy cash into India to look at tapping into the market opportunity as well as the manufacturing opportunity. In addition to that, I think also from an entrepreneur's perspective, I think the regulatory framework or the government frameworks have been extremely supportive. When we were trying to raise capital, we were also looking at debt options. And, in this particular round, we found participation of SIDBI as well as the Technology Development Board. And that is like a very welcome move, because this was not something that we were anticipating, or that system existed 24 months ago. And in fact, this framework is evolving very fast. We are talking to numerous bankers, and bankers are also looking at the possibilities where if you have a government contract, how it can be supported. So I think the future looks definitely bright if entrepreneurs are looking at the space and defense sector. The caveat being, please do not look at space and defense where government and military will be your only customer. It is extremely important to look at enterprise opportunities within India and also outside of India. As long as that framework is stitched out well, I think, businesses will thrive.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I think we've had a great discussion here. I personally have learned a lot. Thank you very much for participating in the panel.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.